Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Coming up on today's podcast later, we'll talk about CC Sabathia. The longtime Indians and Yankees pitcher is going to the Hall of Fame, but there's some controversy. We'll get into that and other Hall of Fame-related things. The Cavs are back in action, but the biggest story in Cleveland, even though it's not imminent, is still what are the Browns going to do with the second pick in the NFL draft. And that's where we'll begin next, right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers.
You're watching Adam the Bull on the Bet Rivers Network.
So, we are roughly 3 months from the start of the NFL draft, right? It's in late April. We're in late January. We're all freezing our butts off here right now. Hopefully we won't be in April when the draft takes place. And there's always a lot of controversy when it comes to what's perceived as a weak quarterback class. We don't know that that's true. It's always so funny to me. People are, it's a weak quarterback class. Well, we don't know that. They haven't played a game, and none of these guys have played yet in the NFL. How do we know? Not to mention the fact, and I've talked about this before, there's almost always one quarterback, at least, minimum, in every draft that ends up being a good player. It's the Browns' job to figure out who that guy is. Now, if they think Cam Ward's the only top 10 quarterback in this draft and he goes first to Tennessee, well, then you're out of luck. But the odds are that the Browns, whether you agree with their analysis or not, it's their job to figure it out, right? And odds are that there will be a quarterback when they pick it too that they think is going to be a Super Bowl level quarterback. Now, to me, that there's two tiers of Super Bowl level quarterbacks. There used to be more, but as the games become more pass-centric, some would argue it's gone a little back to the run in recent years, but look at the quarterbacks that are left. They're all, once again this year, top 10 quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, two of the top four. Tier 1 quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels, even after 1 year, is a Tier 2 quarterback. Some would argue Jalen Hurts is not a Tier 2 quarterback. I would argue with them. He may be on the lower end of Tier 2, but in my opinion, he is a Tier 2 quarterback. And Jaden Daniels, if he follows this up with a great season next year, will move into Tier 1 potentially. But you can't, for me, you can't be in Tier 1 after one season. That's just the way I look at it. Feel free to look at it however you want. The point is, you still need a great quarterback. The point is, the position's more valuable than anything else. Yes, it screws you up if you blow it, as the Browns have done almost every time. We understand this. They blew it with Deshaun Watson. It screwed them up. It wasn't the wrong process. Oh, people get scared by that word. They think of process with analytics. It was the wrong result because you got the wrong guy. The Rams decided, and it may not be the case anymore, but the Rams decided that Jared Goff wasn't good enough. They needed to get a better quarterback. Matthew Stafford at the time was a better quarterback. He's not anymore because he's old, but at the time he was significantly better than Jared Goff, and it won them a Super Bowl. Now, could they have won a Super Bowl with Jared Goff? We'll never know. He did get to the Super Bowl. He had a great season this year, and he didn't have a great game when they got eliminated from the playoffs by Washington, but time will tell. He's on an immensely talented team in Detroit if they can win with Jared Goff. When we first started talking about the draft, when we knew the Browns were the second pick, my initial reaction was that I got suckered. I don't even want to say suckered because it may actually turn out to be true. But I think for those of us who are not experts in the draft, and I certainly consider myself in that group, and I consider, no offense, probably 99.99% of you in that group too, if not 100%. We're not experts. There's very few experts. Even the experts are wrong constantly. But we who watch on our TV and maybe see a quarterback play 10 plays or 2 games or even 5 games, there's so much we don't know. There's so much information we don't have. So our tendency is to say, well, Dane Brugler and Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, they all say it's a weak quarterback class. I don't want to draft a quarterback. Well, again, I have a healthy respect for what those guys do. They're amongst the best at the job. They get some inside information. They're not out in the wind like most of us are. But again, the GMs in the NFL, who in theory should know better than anybody, get it wrong all the time. So you can't judge it. First of all, everybody judges a team's draft. We do this. The NFL is a monster. We all love it. We want more content. They need something to talk about. We all judge a draft when the draft happens. That's an absurd exercise. It's only an absurd exercise because we give our grades as if there's some facts to back it up when there is not. There are no facts to back it up, or almost no facts to back it up. You really can't grade a draft for 3 years if you want to do it with a reasonable amount of quality data. And yet we all do it. People are obsessed with looking at draft grades the day after the draft, which is nearly meaningless, if not completely meaningless. And yet nobody really goes back and looks 3 years later to say, hey, how are our grades? And when you actually have some meaningful information. Not the whole picture. I don't know if you ever get the whole picture. You do, I guess. But certainly after 3 years, you have way more facts to back up a grade than you do immediately after. And yet the only time the general public, again, myself included, talks about draft grades is the day after the draft or the week after, maybe. Never comes up 3 years later. Certainly not draft grades. We may talk about, oh, this guy turned out to be good or bad, but we're not like, let's break down this draft and give it a grade. That doesn't really happen. Certainly not as much as in the immediate aftermath. So I say all that to say this. No matter if the Browns draft a quarterback at 2, I am not going, and you call me a Browns homer would be the stupidest thing you ever said, because I've been way more accused of being a Browns hater than a Browns homer, and I'm neither. If the Browns draft a quarterback at 2, I am not going to be critical, no matter who it is. And I know a lot of you, I shouldn't say a lot, I don't know. Some of you will be critical no matter who they take it to in terms of quarterback. Some of you will be critical only if they don't take Ward or Sanders, because that's what mock drafts have told you, or that's who mock drafts have told you are the only quarterbacks worthy of a high pick, and even that's been borderline. And then everybody tries to argue with me, no, it's not because of the mock drafts. It's because, I've watched, I've been hearing people say they've been doing a lot of research the last 4 years. Most of you have not done your research. You're full of shit on every subject, including the NFL draft. If your research includes mock drafts or Facebook posts, or you have done no research, or you've done no legitimate research. And so if the Browns, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, or even I think it should, I don't know enough about these players. I saw Will Howard play a lot this year. I thought he was a good quarterback. I thought he played great down the stretch. How good is he going to be in the NFL? I just don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert about it. I'm not. There's just not enough information. There's too much stuff that we don't know on the outside about players. So if the Browns drafted Quinn Ewers or Jalen Milroe or Will Howard at 2, and most people are going to lose their minds if that happens. And even in my head, I'm saying, well, that's not going to happen. And again, I'm saying that in my head because of mock fucking drafts. And I love mock drafts. I'm not saying they should go away. They're fun to talk about. But we've turned them into a Bible of sorts, and it's fucking crazy. So don't let that affect. I say that, and it probably will affect me on some level, and it probably will affect you to varying degrees. Oh, no, Bull. I'm telling you, I watched Jalen Milroe had his touchdown to interception ratio was bad. He's not going to be good in the NFL. That may be true, but I don't know. That's not enough information to know that. Well, Jalen Milroe wasn't going to go in the first round, so why would you take him at 2? How do you know? How do we know that there's only got to be one other team that thinks Jalen Milroe is going to be the next great quarterback, or Will Howard, or whoever, that might take him in the first round. This idea that, I like Will Howard in the third round, but not in the first round. That's insane. You either think he's going to be a franchise-level quarterback or not. If you don't, why would you ever draft a quarterback that you don't think could potentially be a top 10 quarterback? I wouldn't draft him at all. I mean, well, not in the third round. I'd draft him. If I think a guy's a long shot, well, I'm not drafting him till late when those picks are total crapshoots. But a third-round pick is very valuable. So if I draft a quarterback there, I must feel that he's a really good quarterback. Maybe I'm not as confident as a guy I would take in the first round, but confident enough that I think he can be a top 10 quarterback. And ultimately, if that leads to the Browns taking a guy that might not be on the top of a mock draft at 2, then that's fine. Now, your other argument could be, well, I don't trust the guys making the picks. And that's fair, and I agree. I don't really trust Andrew Berry. I'm not going to be overly confident that he gets it right at 2, but I'm not going to kill the guy for saying, hey, this is the guy I think is going to be the next great quarterback. That's what he's got to do. If I have zero faith he's going to get it right, well, then they're going to screw up no matter what they do. And this idea that, well, they better take Travis Hunter because he's safer, that's just crazy. Travis Hunter seems like he's going to be a great player in the NFL, but he's not a quarterback. Not going to turn the team around. Now, if the Browns truly feel like there is really not a quarterback that can turn this franchise around, then absolutely don't draft a quarterback at 2. I just think that's unlikely. Contrary to my man Mikey McNuggets, I think as good as Malik Neighbors is, the Giants would rather have Bo Nix than Malik Neighbors right now. I would if I were the Giants. They never admit that, of course, but I would. Now, this year, they might not get the choice to the third quarterback in this year's draft. Who knows if they like that guy? Can't make legitimate progress on any kind of consistent basis unless you have the quarterback. It's that simple. Won't be the final conversation about this, but I do want to switch gears. Congratulations to CC Sabathia, the longtime Indians. Yes, he played for the Indians. And Yankees player goes into the Hall of Fame, or will be inducted into the Hall of Fame this summer. He said yesterday that he will wear a Yankee cap. He did play longer for the Yankees than he did for the Indians. At the end, it's not his choice officially. The Hall of Fame decides what hat is it on your bust in your plaque, on your head on the plaque. But as long as the player makes an arguable choice, which certainly the Yankees are for CC, they're going to always go with the player. Greg Maddux, I mentioned this earlier. Greg Maddux, he went in with no team on the cap because he had played a long time for both the Braves and the Cubs. And obviously, even as a Cubs fan, I would think most fans, even though I'm a Cubs fan personally, I think most fans, certainly, unless you're a Cubs fan, you think of Greg. I mean, I'm a Cubs fan. I still think of Greg Maddux more as a Brave than a Cub. So I could have, if he would have wanted to go in as a Brave, that would have been a no-brainer. I wouldn't have thought about that for a second. Now, Sabathia, it's a little different. I don't think there's as much of a difference because you look at Greg Maddux's career in Atlanta versus the Cubs. I mean, it's way better. I think he only had like one Hall of Fame season with the Cubs, maybe 2. Every year almost in Atlanta was a Hall of Fame season. Whereas with the Yankees and the Indians, Sabathia, if you look at his statistically, his numbers are pretty even between the Indians and Yankees. He played a little longer for the Yankees. And he maybe had maybe had a little bit of a higher peak with the Yankees, but he also had a little bit of a lower, or not a little bit, but a lower floor with the Yankees. It's pretty close. So, but if he wants to go in as a Yankee, I get it. As much as I hate the Yankees and would love to see him wear the big C out there, what are you going to do? Jim Thome went as an Indian. If Kenny Lofton someday goes in, he will go in as an Indian, same as Omar Vizquel. Vizquel's not going to go in. He's not getting the votes. Obviously, the off-the-field stuff set him back. In my opinion, he was a borderline candidate anyway. I know that makes a lot of you apoplectic because he's a great defender. For me personally, because defense is there are so many great stats to prove how good a hitter is. Defense, there's almost none, if any. And so I don't weigh a player's defense nearly as much as their offense when it comes to the Hall of Fame. And to me, Omar Vizquel was not a good enough hitter to be in the Hall of Fame, even as great as he was defensively. And that's why I wouldn't vote for him. I don't have a problem if he gets in. He won't because of the off-the-field stuff now. But Kenny Lofton, to me, is much more interesting. He got booted off the ballot immediately, which is crazy. If you look at some guys like Tim Raines and that style of player that have gone in more recent years, like, to me, Kenny Lofton's definitely a better player than Harold Baines. And again, I can't think of what the committee is now called. It used to be called the Veterans Committee. And I can't think of what they call it now, but there's actually more than one committee that votes on players that are kicked off the ballot. And I think at some point Kenny Lofton will get in. We've seen some guys like Baines and McGriff and others get more respect from some of these veteran committees, especially guys that didn't use steroids or we don't think they use steroids in a steroid era. And I think Kenny Lofton, when you look at his career numbers, the one thing for Kenny is the last bunch of years of his career, he tailed off and was not this Hall of Fame level player. His peak was clearly Hall of Fame. And if you look at some of the, if you get real baseball nerd and look at Baseball Reference and some of the markers for Hall of Famers, he's kind of, on the borderline on some of these things or just short a little bit. He's one of those players that maybe if he retired earlier, he would have had a stronger case. I think it's crazy that he went off the ballot once. I personally would vote for him, and I do think at some point Kenny Lofton will get in the Hall of Fame. I think Andrew Jones's career after the age of 30, and Kenny Lofton dropped off later, a little older than Andrew Jones, but I would vote for Andrew Jones. I think he'll get in the Hall of Fame next year, as will Carlos Beltran, which is interesting because Carlos Beltran is taking no heat or almost no heat from the voters for cheating with the garbage can scandal, and yet the steroid guys get crushed for it, obviously. And in my mind, and I know I'm in the minority here, what Carlos Beltran and the Astros did to me is worse than the steroids. It was a more direct connection to success, in my opinion. There's been a lot of guys that took steroids that weren't any good, or, comparatively. And not every guy that took steroids became a Hall of Fame level player. What my opinion on the steroid guys in the Hall of Fame, and none of them have gotten in, and I don't know if any of them will get in, my opinion has always been the same. I personally would vote for them, but the standard for those guys would be higher. So if a guy was borderline, for example, Andy Pettitte, now to me, even if he didn't take steroids, I would not vote for Andy Pettitte. But he did. And so that raises the standards on him. So to me, he's a no-brainer no. Whereas obviously Bonds and Clemens, Palmeiro, Sosa, I'd have all those guys in the Hall of Fame. Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez. I don't have any sympathy for any of them because they made this decision. But I think the Hall of Fame is supposed to tell the story of the game, and I don't think you could tell the story of Major League Baseball without Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Rafael Palmeiro. I just think it's disingenuous. The league was not discouraging drug use at the time. I think it's hypocritical. I think the owners are in a tricky spot because they've been given no guidance. I think if these guys had gone on the ballot maybe 20 years later, things might have changed. Because I think as the electorate gets younger, I think more of the younger voters will vote for these guys, is my guess. But it is what it is, and none of those guys are getting in anytime soon, if at all. All right, thanks to Max and Z for producing. Thanks to all of you for watching. Dustin and I will be live Thursday at 2 p.m. Where else but right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. See you, everybody.